The discussion today will be about building your AI toolkit, when to use AI, and when to stay human, and what that all really means. So the things I'm going to walk through are kind of like three different kits that I like to think about within your toolkit or your toolbox, whatever you want to call it. And the first kind of kit is using AI as a thinking partner. So the idea is having a curious mindset for any of the LLMs that you're using. I'll walk through some practical examples of what that looks like. Kit number two is when you say, hey, I have things that I do a lot that are repeated often. Maybe it's a lot of similar information. It could be database stuff like spreadsheets, stuff like that. When do you want to automate those in your workflow, in your daily process? So I'm going to talk about repetition versus risk. I have a matrix that I put together to talk about that. And I'll show an example of how I took the Startup Wisconsin newsletter and automated the events that I publish in the newsletter. So we have all the events on the website, but how do I pull that down and format it into a way that's really easy to read, and I'm not spending an hour or two manually typing and formatting it the way I want in the newsletter tool. So, and then the final thing is kit three, which is building custom tools with AI, or no code, as many may call it. But I think the question becomes like, before you build something like that, what is the team impact? Like, what is the test there? Like, why should you be spending extra time and effort actually building something like an internal tool? Is it really worth your time? So that's something we'll talk about. And how you can take maybe you're already having like really cool conversations in like Claude or GPT that's like really, really helpful, and it's giving you the output you want, but you'd like to share that with the team or just make it a singular tool. And I'm going to walk through an example of how I did that for the Startup Wisconsin newsletter. All right. So a little bit about me before we jump in as well. If you don't know who I am or don't know me that well, I'm the marketing and brand manager at Headway. I have about 15 years of experience across marketing, media, and events. Kind of done a little bit of everything. I joined Headway in 2017 after working in corporate marketing. I worked on a team at a company called Alta Resources. I also worked at a different agency before I was at Headway that was more marketing and advertising. I did like TV spots and stuff like that. I also did like photography and content development for building websites, things like that. I kind of did whatever it took to get the job done, and I've worked in a lot of different industries with a lot of different clients. And I think it gives me really great context when I think about solving problems with these AI tools and who needs to use them and when they make sense. All right. So the biggest thing that I want you to think about too as you're going through this, like just because I'm showing you how to do something or recommending things, the most important thing is creating this toolkit that works for you. And one of the things I want to talk about as well is like the idea of experimenting, measuring, and learning. So you're gonna either have conversations in LLMs like Claude or ChatGPT, or you're going to build some kind of tool with like Lovable or Claude Code or whatever the heck you're experimenting with. But the important thing is to reflect as you're using these tools. Like, hey, how much time did I spend making this thing? And is it really saving me time? Thinking through those little questions like that is really, really important. And also, I think the thing we have to consider is the pace of innovation with these AI tools. Like every week or every month, it used to feel like every couple months there was like a new update with like GPT or whatever. But now it feels like every single week there's something new on the market that's like, oh, I just changed my whole process last week because I wanted to start using this thing. And now there's this other thing available. And there's so many different tools out there, even beyond the typical LLMs that I'll share today. But it's the ecosystem of AI apps that are available today are just incredible. I'll be sharing more candidly about other things I use at the end of the talk, but I wanted to keep it simple because I think it's really more about the mindset that you have when you're using these tools in your workflow, and consider the amount of effort it takes to just learn these tools and figure out where they fit in within your process. So let's move on to the next one, which is the first kit, using AI as your thinking partner. So you want to use AI like Claude or GPT as your thinking partner when you're stuck on a problem. You don't really know how to like think through it clearly. You need to brainstorm like, hey, I need to think of for example, like I create a lot of YouTube content. So with YouTube, I'm like, hey, here's the transcript from the video that I just edited. give me 10 different options with a certain character limit, right? Give me 10 different title options that I can use on YouTube. Sometimes I want SEO within the YouTube title. Sometimes I just want it to really stick out and catch attention. And so it's really, really great for something like that. Like I want to brainstorm, and instead of me starting from zero, I'm just reacting, right? And I'm curating, like, oh, I like this, I like that. And sometimes I'll like mix two different titles together. Like, oh, I like that one and that one. And I'm all of a sudden becoming like a chef in a kitchen. And that's really what it's about. And again, if you're doing one-off tasks that need your perspective, it's really important that your taste, your expertise, your human experience is a really, really big part of that. If it requires your unique perspective, context, or taste, remember using AI as a thinking partner and not a replacement. So you don't want to just say, hey, make the thing, and then whatever the output is, you paste it on the internet. Like, that's not what this is about. This is about like having a conversation with yourself, with an assistant, so to speak, like almost like a duplicate version of yourself, because the more context you can give it, the better the results you're going to get. And we're going to talk more about that. But before you prompt, you want to ask, am I asking AI to think with me or for me? Going back to the whole like curating and having taste and sharing your expertise and your unique voice. And so again, if you're not asking AI to think along with you, you're going to get the slop stuff, like, hey, generic requests, not giving it context, or like documents or like candid thoughts about the thing that you're trying to achieve in the conversation. You're just going to get like generic output, and it, AKA AI slop. So just think about that as you're prompting, and really consider. And again, there are templates out there, obviously, for prompts. And while I think they're great, the other day there was someone that posted about the idea of like minimal prompting. Like, the idea is like, do you really need the super extensive prompt that's super, super specific to get the output you want? And the answer is starting to become no, because as much as like these really, really specific long-winded prompts are great, sometimes like less is better, because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room to keep going and doesn't put you too much in a box. Just a quick example would be if I was putting together like the newsletter and I wanted to maybe add like a new section in the newsletter. I'm like, hey, I want to add like some introductory like opinion pieces to the beginning of my newsletter. And instead of saying, hey, write me an intro for the Startup Wisconsin newsletter for November, it might just think about, well, the holidays are coming up, things like that. Here's what typically has happened in November for Startup Wisconsin, or in the past. It might just it'll try to like make stuff up, and it might actually hallucinate. But if you say, hey, I have a file of upcoming events data for the Startup Wisconsin newsletter. So I have a CSV file that's from our CMS that has all the data. It's got URLs to all the events. It's got the event titles. It's got an event description. It's got who's hosting it. And then I say, hey, help me identify key themes for November that I can speak to for the introduction of the newsletter. So what that really, really does is it creates confidence, because you're providing that context. You're providing these documents, maybe some screenshots, maybe some links, and it's just, or even just your perspective. Like, if you have candid thoughts that you want to add on top of that, just do it. And sometimes you can use like the voice chat, like with GPT or Claude, like on your phone, or on your computer, like whatever makes sense to you. I just like to type for some reason. I'm not like a voice guy yet. Maybe I'll get into that. But the more it knows, the better it goes. Like, that's how I really like to think about it. Some of the popular tools as a thinking partner, if you're not really sure, ChatGPT and Claude are kind of my two go-to. I've been leaning way more into Claude lately. And then Perplexity and Gemini are other great ones as well. Again, it's more about like finding the tool that you like working with, and you like the results that you're getting with it. Okay, so I want to jump into the newsletter example. So I'm using Claude, and here's how an example of how it went. So I wanted to figure out the example before. I'm like, hey, give me an introduction, a better starting point for an introduction for my newsletter. So in the example, I said, hey, I have a file. I attached the CSV file. I said, hey, help me identify key themes for November. And here's kind of like how I processed it. So I'll go through a couple slides here. But the thing is I created a clear starting point for the discussion. I provided context with the data file. Then I'll show in the next slide, it started to provide these clear themes with really specific examples of why those themes even exist, because I gave it really specific data. I've never, in this first example here, I don't know if you can see in the screenshot, one of the first examples that says that, one of the themes is that pitch season is here in Wisconsin for startup pitches. I never really thought about that before. Like, I guess November every year is kind of when a lot of pitches happen. Okay. Some, food for thought. And then as you go on in this other screenshot, you can see the other themes. And I'm like, oh, interesting. Why this starts to become way more helpful beyond even this. So first of all, I have speed. Now they have the ability to curate what I think is worth grabbing or talking about with all the events that are happening, because these themes are being presented to me instead of me looking at all the information in that spreadsheet, trying to figure out what the themes are. It's, putting the themes together for me. But not only did I get themes, I got examples of events to tie into those themes. And not only that, now I have ideas for social media posts as well. So if I'm on LinkedIn, I'm like, oh, you know what? This week I should actually talk about the healthcare life sciences stuff is having a moment in November. There's the venture health event. There was the healthcare innovation pitch. There's elder care founders getting together at Starting Block. There's a discovery driven research panel that's happening. Like, okay, that's cool. Like, I have some food for thought for content on LinkedIn. So again, this is just a really great example of like, when you give it really clear context, it can be more helpful to you and give you ideas and help you think through just like the tasks that you have ahead. Or if you're looking for ideas for marketing or social or whatever that is, this is just a great tool to help you think through ideas that you're either stuck on, or if you're looking for new ideas to work on. Some other use cases for, a thinking partner, just I wanted to share a couple examples, was if you're writing a job posting. If you've never written a job posting before, there's, obviously like great resources online and stuff like that. But I honestly, because I've never like written a job post by myself, other than collaborating with folks at Headway, if I was like in a position and I was a founder, I'm like, hey, I need to post a job about this role for my team. Ask me questions to help me write a really clear job posting. So just start having a conversation. It'll ask you questions and follow up. And because I think what happens is like a lot of times you'll miss context for what people are looking for when they're applying for jobs, or maybe you're just trying to figure out like what actually is a good fit for your role. You might even be thinking, oh, I need this kind of person or this kind of role in my business. And you might actually end up realizing that you need something slightly different or something more specific. So through that conversation, that thinking partner, using AI, you can get to more clarity there and get like a great output, such as a job posting. The other thing is preparing for an investor pitch. So again, giving it context is key. If you're a founder, if you have access to the investor website or any data that you have about the person that you're pitching to or the firm, give it that information, whether it's links, documents, stuff like that. Share your pitch deck with Claude or GPT and be like, hey, here's my pitch deck. Here's something I'm working on. And then maybe even have it ask you questions about how the pitch might go, and maybe do some role playing to test how you would answer those investor questions. So it's a really, really great way to just like get out of your own head for a little bit and realize like the gaps in your thinking, or maybe the gaps in your pitch deck, or whatever it may be. So just wanted to share a couple of those. All right, we're going to move on to kit 2, which is automating your workflows. So I want to just go into mindset first before we kind of show examples of what that can look like. So you want to automate when it's repetitive, weekly or daily, it's high volume and low risk. We'll get into that in a second. And that there's a clear input and a clear output. It's just easy to understand. It's not a complex thing. Obviously, there are people doing complex automation, but when it comes to the things that you're doing on a daily basis, like starting with something simple is going to make your life a lot easier as you learn how to use these tools and how they can integrate into your process. Things that you don't want to automate is when something like your competitive advantage, such as if you're a consultant, like you don't want to like overly automate. Like I've seen like if you go to a consultancy website, or maybe it's someone that got into consulting recently, or they're doing it part-time, they'll have like a chat tool that like you can say, hey, chat with my AI version of me. And sometimes you'll chat with them and ask for advice, and it feels like really I don't know, it just doesn't feel great. You're like, oh, I don't really like what it's shared or things like that. So you want to make sure that you're not just automating yourself too much. You want to make sure that if it's your competitive advantage, your unique voice, and it requires constant judgment from someone like yourself, you don't really want to automate that. And so like I really feel like these chat tools that are on sites for customer support, or if you're a consultant and you just want to give advice to people through a chat tool, I would just be mindful of that, because it can like hurt your brand. It can hurt how people perceive you and the experience they get with your company. So again, there are really great customer support tools out there, but you just want to be mindful of how you're automating some of these things. All right. So I want to just visually just talk about the repetition versus risk kind of mentality here with the matrix. So an example of low repetition, low risk, again, would be customer service. But also, like I said before, data entry. So if I'm doing something with the newsletter, the data is super clear, and the risk of me accidentally, maybe, for example, if a link, for example, was hallucinated and it was a bad link in the newsletter, whoopsie daisy, not the end of the world, and easily fixable. But when you have something like strategic planning or obviously financial trading, like a whoopsie daisy is not a good thing. So when you're thinking about the tasks and the processes that you have on a day-to-day basis, data entry is probably a really great place to start, and the types of outputs that you can get with that data entry, such as like analysis or reformatting information into something that's more useful. Okay, so I'm going to jump into an example that I have been using for the Startup Wisconsin newsletter. So here, and I've been using Claude for this. So here, and the scenario is I used to manually add events to the newsletter, type them in before we had the CMS and Webflow. So I would find all the events. I had an Asana card with a checklist, and I'd add them in manually. And it took a long time, like hours to do that. But now that we have the CMS data in Webflow, where I'm like adding events to CMS, which still takes time. I'm still working on the automating of that part, like scraping data, where I'm just reviewing it instead. But what's nice is like on the back end of it, where I have the data in the CMS already, I can export that CSV file and bring that into Claude and say, hey, help me reformat this for HTML so I can copy that HTML into my newsletter. And I'm not sitting there going through 50 plus events and typing them all in. They can just like be formatted very quickly. I had examples already from the previous newsletters that I'd written myself, which is great. So I could show what done looks like, which is super important, I think, for the output expectations of these LLMs. And the important thing was like, I wanted to figure out like, hey, how can I turn this chat with Claude into a reusable chat or a tool, or as they call it, project in Claude, or like a custom GPT would be another example. So I wanted to make it reusable as a prompt or a tool. I just want to say I am seeing your comments come in the chat, and I'll get to those later at the Q&A section when we get to the end. So I appreciate it. All right. So in the screenshot example, you can kind of see how I kind of reached out. And again, I had multiple like different chats over the past year or two with Claude or GPT. And so at the top, I pasted in previous information that I had from other chats to just give it context. And then I had a request to say, and then so I pasted the prompt file that I had from the other conversations, and then it started to talk to me. So I'm like, okay, here's how that goes. And eventually it would create an HTML file that I could download, which is really, really great. And then I could copy and paste that into my newsletter. And here's kind of the results that I got, just to kind of show you what the experience is like and why I actually like using Claude on a personal level. Again, you can use other tools, but I like it. So it took some feedback loops to get it right. So again, as I said before, I asked the previous chat to create a prompt text that I can add to this Claude project now. And now I have this project in Claude that I can rely on to get formatting done. Oops, I have a typo in there, without hallucinations. And it's easy to do this simple ask. So now every time I go in there, I don't have to like create a prompt or add context. I can say, hey, I have events for the new newsletter. Can you format them for me? And it's pretty easy. Like I literally said in this screenshot, help me format the data from the CSV attached. And it was super easy. And in this example, I was actually starting to organize events by city. So it shows in the HTML preview, Appleton, Wisconsin, and then the events that are happening there. And it's just really, really nice because I can preview it right here. I can switch between the preview view and the code view and just copy the HTML and bring it right into my newsletter tool and just paste it right in. And again, I think the biggest change that I've seen over time is as I ask for specific changes like that, like organize it by city versus just chronological, there's less like weird results happening where it's like completely changing the formatting, getting rid of things for some reason. It's just been getting better and better over time. The biggest thing that I want you guys to think about is like what used to take me hours now takes me minutes. So it used to take me hours to like add 50 to 70 events to the newsletter because I was doing so many different things and doing it between other tasks that I had. And it's saving me a ton of time. And I think that that's like why I ended up like turning it into kind of like this automated workflow. And so, the one thing you want to consider before you automate again, as we kind of go through this, there's this pattern that I like to think about. It's repetitive. There's a clear format, a clear input and output that's predictable. Like, you know what it should look like, and you should be able to give that feedback loop to the tool, and it should be able to improve it. It's reviewable. Like, again, I had the preview window. I'd say, oh, this is actually giving me the correct output. So I can edit before sending or publishing, and it saves me time. Again, I'm saving a ton of time by not having to reformat these things. And again, things you don't want to automate is your unique voice or perspective, strategic decisions, high stakes customer communications, or anything that changes frequently. I will say, on the note of high stakes customer communication or a high stakes conversation in general with anyone, whether it's an investor or someone on your team, if you're trying to have a really thoughtful response to something, that's where using AI as a thinking partner is important. Like, hey, here's context of the conversation. I want to know how to respond thoughtfully and respectfully to this. What should I be considering? And so again, that's just an example of like, you don't want to automate a response to something that's super, super important or urgent, which is just like kind of like, pre-built kind of output from an LLM. So, all right. So with that, we'll move on to Kit 3, which is building custom tools. So this actually did pretty recently because the things I'll walk through of why that's the case will explain that. Before you try to build anything that's like an actual internal tool using something like Lovable or Claude Code or something like that, or Bubble, whatever it may be, you don't want to build things that already exist. Like, you don't need a project management tool. Asana is like an example of that, or Monday, or Jira, or whatever. Email marketing, like MailChimp and HubSpot exist. Video call, like, right. You don't want to build things that if at the bottom here, I say, if the existing tool already exists and does 80% of what you need, don't spend your time building something custom, unless it absolutely will impact you and your team. So things I think about will multiple team members need it? So for example, I'm in that Claude thing, that Claude chat, that's in my custom private account. I know I can share different things, but like, I have all this context in my mind, and Claude has context from my account, and I obviously built this little tool, but I don't want to have people be required to have a Claude account or do all these things. What if there's a way I could like have like a simple page or a tool that they could go to and be able to reformat the newsletter? Like, if I was outsourcing writing for the newsletter, this person could do this task without me, completely, without any questions. So is it a process that's been stable for at least 3 months? Yes. With the Startup Wisconsin newsletter, I've been reformatting this thing every single month. There isn't a tool that does what you need it to do. And yes, I have looked, around. So I would encourage you to do a simple Google search, or again, chat with Claude or GPT or Gemini or whatever, and see if there are tools out there that do what you want to do. Build time, consider that. Like, how extensive of a build time is it for version 1? Which, again, think about that too. It doesn't have to do everything right away. Think about it as an MVP, like that first version. Um, is it saving time, across your team or for yourself? And like, how long does it take to pay that back, that time, that investment? Like if there's a little bit of hosting or whatever, or having a Lovable account, things like that, like, are you offsetting the cost of time and resources to make it happen? Otherwise, use existing tools, even if they're imperfect, because they're good enough. Okay, so I want to go into the example. I was in Claude doing those things, and now I'm like, okay, I want to build an app using Lovable. So in this scenario, the first thing I did was like, oh, what if other team members needed to access this thing I'm using? I don't want them to have to log into anything. They can just go to a website, upload a CSV, and they can get the output that they need. I want it to be super easy to use and maybe even faster, because sometimes with Claude, it'll be processing and doing its thing. And sometimes it can take like 30 seconds. I found that with this new Lovable tool, it's like immediate, and it's pretty cool. And I also was thinking like, oh, maybe over time I could iterate on it, and it can give me some other options for output, or maybe a quick report on, like, again, we were talking about the themes before. So in one kind of like dashboard view, maybe I could get, hey, here's the HTML format for the newsletter. As you're writing the newsletter, here's some key themes to think about. It almost is like this kind of like newsletter writing buddy or something. Like that's like a kind of a vision I have for it. But right now I just want it to format stuff for me. So the first thing I did was like, well, I opened Lovable, and I was like, okay, what do I prompt in this thing? And I thought for a second, actually, I should ask Claude what the prompt should be, because Claude knows exactly what I need and what I want. So I went to Claude and I said, hey, can you help me make a prompt for Lovable? And then that's what it did here. And then I was able to download the text file. And as you can see here, I went over to Lovable and I brought this in, and it was able to create this very simple application, this web app, which is super cool. I just wanted to show you kind of what it looks like. So it's a simple page. It is live. You can see the URL there. Obviously, you would need a CSV file formatted like the ones that I have for it to work. But it's really simple. It says drag and drop. You upload the CSV file, and what's cool is like you can right now in this first version, you can format the events by city that are chronological, or you can do the whole state chronological, and it'll generate HTML. And then the other thing it does is it gives me like a small report of like events that are happening per city, which is really cool. The one thing, like I said before, was like it'd be cool to add like the themes that it's seeing across the events, or so ideas for social posts for the events to help promote them and all that kind of stuff. And then what I like too is like there was a preview button, so it'll open a new tab and it'll show me a preview of like what the HTML output will look like if I were to paste it into the newsletter, which is really great. Or I can click on it to make sure like they're the right links and they're not like hallucinated links, which has happened in the past. So that's just a quick example of like, okay, I built this really quick tool. It literally took me 10 minutes from Claude to Lovable to do this. Like, so again, cost of investment, not like next to nothing. And this is something that could be super helpful for me. So I'm not sitting there having chats with Claude and all that kind of stuff. It just gives me a really clear output, and also a really focused experience, because it's really easy to be in Claude and just start kind of like having other conversations. So I think that's what's nice about this. It's like this newsletter writing buddy. I can stay focused, and I can get my job done. Again, at the end of the day, with any of these things that you're doing with AI, does AI help me save time or get better results, better output, whatever the thing you're trying to get done? I think it's really easy to start using a lot of these tools and waste a lot of time in them. Again, there's a learning curve of like just, experimenting, messing around. But I think the most important thing is like, oh, I'm using this tool now, but am I actually getting I think there's a difference between getting better results and getting different results. Because like if you're doing the same, how do I say this? Was the way you were doing before AI and the way with AI, if you're getting the same results, like what's the point? I think that's how I like to think about it. At the end of the day, the AI or these tools that you want to work with, they should be either saving you time, increasing the quality or volume of your output, or making you money. I guess that would be the other option. So that's what I want you to think about is like, does AI help me save time or get better results? Like that's like the big picture. And again, going back to the speed of like innovation that's happening with AI. There's new tools every week, every month. It's hard to keep up. And if you have a team onboarding people, all these AI tools, like, hey, we're all going to start using this now. And then 3 months later, there's a whole nother ecosystem of tools. And we're like, hey, it's like, that is like, it can be exhausting. So I just want you to be mindful of the pace uh, I'm trying to think of the way to say that too. The pace that you take on some of these new tools and require your team to use it. And there's a little bit of kind of nuance to that, and knowing when to say, hey, we're actually going to start implementing this, because it's like a no-brainer to start using this now. And I think we're all trying to figure this out. Like I don't know everything still. I'm trying to figure out this stuff. I just wanted to share kind of the cool things that I've been experiencing. I know at Headway, the design team's been doing some really cool stuff. So if you go to the Startup Wisconsin Week calendar, there's events coming up on Wednesday and Friday with Brianna and Tim. Brianna's going to be talking about prototyping with AI. So using tools like Figma Make to build a clickable prototype really, really quickly. But the things you have to think through to make them actually useful within your work. And Tim will be talking about how to automate design systems within Figma to other tools like Jira and stuff like that. So just want you to think about that as you kind of implement these tools, and don't just assume that just because you're implementing these things means they're going to be the thing you use in the next 6 months, or that like it's going to be an easy onboarding experience for everyone.